I was carrying a crate of limes through the back door of my own diner when I heard my best friend say, through the half-open office door, "If he ever asks, I won't say no." Then her sister's voice, tinny on speakerphone, said my name. "Jonah doesn't count, Sadie. Jonah's furniture." And Sadie Lane laughed a laugh I'd never heard in 12 years of hearing all her laughs, and said, "He's never going to ask, Pip. So it doesn't matter. What matters is getting you and Milo out before the 14th. Now tell me exactly what the notice says." I stood in that hallway holding 30 pounds of limes, and I want to be honest with you about the order my brain processed that in, because the order matters. First, she won't say no. 12 years of best friendship, co-owners of the halfway diner, a woman I had loved so carefully and so quietly that I'd promoted it to a personality trait, and she won't say no. Second, arriving like a train 2 seconds behind the first, the 14th. 10 days away. Third, getting you and Milo out. Milo is 8. Milo draws sharks on our napkins. Out of what? And fourth, the one that decided the next 10 days of my life, the sound of Sadie's voice on that last part. Because I know every register that woman has. I've heard her talk down a drunk twice my size with a coffee pot in one hand. I've heard her negotiate with the meat guy like a hostage taker, and under the steel in her voice, talking to her little sister about the 14th, there was something I had never once heard in it before. Fear. So here's what I did with the 2 things I learned in that hallway. The first one, I won't say no, I put in my pocket. I didn't earn that sentence, I overheard it. And there's a difference, and the difference is the whole story. So hold that thought. The second one, I walked straight into. I knocked on the office door with my elbow, set down the limes, looked at my best friend, who had wiped her face into shift manager neutral in the time it took the door to swing, and said, "Whatever's happening on the 14th, I'm in it. Don't waste either of our time pretending there's nothing." I heard notice. I heard Milo. Start there. Sadie Lane looked at me for a long 3 seconds, doing the math on how much I'd heard, and I watched her decide, wrongly, thank God, that I'd only heard the end. She slid her phone across the desk. On it, a photo Piper had texted, a document taped to a front door, notice of forfeiture and intent to cancel land contract. All rights terminate and possession reverts on the 14th. Hearing, 9 a.m. Dunmore Properties. "Ray Dunmore is taking my sister's house," Sadie said, "in 10 days. After 6 years of payments, and I've got about $4,000 and a diner that smells like limes, and I am going to stop him." She looked up at me, and the fear was gone from her voice, packed away where she keeps things, and what was left was the Sadie I'd follow into weather. "Well, you said you're in it." "My name is Jonah Beckett. I flip eggs, I keep books, and for 10 days last spring I helped take apart the most patient predator our county ever produced. Stay with me, because the house Ray Dunmore was stealing wasn't just Piper's. That's the part Sadie hadn't told me. That's the part Sadie hadn't told anyone. And it was buried under 3 more secrets, each one deeper than the last, and the deepest one was mine, riding in my pocket the whole way down. If he ever asks, I won't say no. Piper came to the diner the next morning before we unlocked, Milo in tow with his shark notebook, and laid out the whole architecture of the trap over coffee she didn't drink. And I need you to understand this trap, because it is legalish, it is everywhere, and it is built precisely for people the banks won't touch. 6 years ago, Piper, young single mom, waitressing, credit wrecked by a medical year, couldn't get a mortgage anywhere. Ray Dunmore could help. Ray Dunmore is famous for helping. He sells houses on land contract. Contract for deed. No bank needed. Handshake terms, folksy paperwork. You pay him monthly, like rent, except it builds toward ownership, and after year 7, a balloon payment converts it all, and the deed is yours. Miss the fine print though, and the fine print is the whole machine. Until that deed transfers, you own nothing. Every payment is forfeitable. One default, as defined by Ray, cured only as permitted by Ray, and the contract cancels. He keeps 6 years of your money as liquidated damages, keeps the house, and starts fresh with the next family. It's not a house sale, it's a slot machine shaped like a house, and the house always wins because the house is his. I never missed, Piper said, flat, a woman who'd said it 100 times to a wall. 71 payments, Jonah. I have got bank printouts for 68 of them. 3 I paid cash at his office. He gives a discount for cash. Now I know why. And one of those, payment 61, from last fall, he says never happened. No receipt. We show a default, sweetheart. It's been accruing. He waited 8 months, let me keep paying, and then, 4 months before my balloon, 4 months before the deed, his notice goes up on my door. Default, forfeiture, hearing on the 14th. And here's the part that'll really get you. She laughed. One bad note. The magistrate who hears his forfeitures plays poker at Dunmore's Lake Place. Everybody knows. That's not a rumor, it's a schedule. Milo, not looking up from his notebook, said, "We might have to move again. I'm not telling my class till it's for sure." 8 years old, bookkeeping his own bad news. I had to go stand in the kitchen for a minute. When I came back, I did the thing I'm actually for, besides eggs. Piper. Every statement, every printout, every text from Dunmore, the contract, both notices. I want paper copies by tonight. I keep books for a living. His story has to reconcile, and stories that skip a payment on purpose never reconcile clean. And tomorrow I'm going to the county recorder, because a man who runs a machine has run it before, and machines leave title history. I flipped her contract to the default clause and read it out loud so we'd all hear the trap in daylight. Default defined as any payment not received and posted. Posted, friends. Posted being a thing that happens inside his office, at his discretion, on his books. There's the machine's keyhole, I said. He doesn't have to lose your payment, Piper. He just has to not post it. The clause makes his own filing cabinet the judge. Sadie looked at me across the counter with an expression I didn't have a file for yet. What? I said. Nothing, said Sadie Lane, wiping a clean counter. Keep talking numbers, it's a good look. And friends, I put that in my pocket too. It was getting to be a full pocket. The county recorder's office is a beige room where the town keeps its confessions. I pulled the title history on Piper's address, and there it was, the machine, in tabbed chronological order, and I'm going to read you the pattern the way I read it standing at that counter with my ears going hot. The house has been sold on land contract 4 times in 11 years. 4 families before Piper. I wrote down every name. The Kowalskis, forfeited in year 6. A family named Draper, forfeited in year 7. 4 months before their balloon. A widow named Ochoa, year 6. Every single contract canceled inside the final stretch. Every family's payments kept as damages. House recycled, price bumped, next family in. Same house, same man. Never once has that deed actually transferred to a buyer. It is not real estate. It is a harvest rotation, and the crop is people the banks won't touch. Planted, grown for 6 years, and cut down 4 months before they'd have owned something. I photographed everything, and I was on the courthouse steps when the day's second event found me, because in a town this size, the recorder's office has a lunch table, and Ray Dunmore feeds a lot of lunch tables. My phone rang. Unknown local number. A warm, porch swing voice. "Jonah Beckett. Ray Dunmore. We've never met proper, but I eat your patty melt every Thursday. Hell of a melt." A pause exactly long enough to be a message. "Heard you were down at the recorder's this morning, pulling history on one of my properties." Now, I do love a curious mind. But curiosity's a lot like grease, son. Fine on the griddle, dangerous on the floor. And then, almost gently, "You check who holds your lease lately? The halfway's a nice spot. Renewal's coming up. Be a shame if the terms got curious too." "You have a blessed day." He hung up. I stood there on the steps and understood the size of what we'd stepped into. Ray Dunmore owned Piper's house, and Ray Dunmore's LLC. I confirmed it within the hour, 3 shell layers deep, because of course, owned our building. The diner. 12 years of our lives, month to month past renewal. He didn't just hold Piper's future. He held the counter I'd been sliding pie across since I was 23. I drove back and told Sadie all of it. The 4 families, the rotation, the call, the lease. She listened with her arms crossed, and when I finished, she said just one thing, and it's the thing I want on a shirt. Good. Now he's threatened the diner. Because I could maybe have talked myself into being scared for me, Jonah. But nobody gets to threaten the diner and the house in the same week. Now it's a war and I'm catered. The next 3 days, Dunmore squeezed, because patient predators aren't passive ones. A certified letter arrived at the diner. Our lease renewal, months early, with new terms, rent up 40%, personal guarantees, a conduct clause. The message wasn't subtle. The message was the point. Then his nephew Deke started taking a corner booth every morning, ordering coffee, tipping a nickel, and watching Sadie work with a little smile, until the 3rd morning when Sadie walked over, refilled his cup to the exact brim so it couldn't be lifted, and said, "Tell your uncle the pie's on the house. Everything else here costs full price, including intimidating my staff." Deke stopped coming. The letters didn't. And Thursday, the man himself came in for his patty melt. He arrived at the lunch rush peak, when the room was fullest. Of course he did. An audience is a utility. Took the center counter stool like a mayor, and ordered loud and friendly, remembering the busboy's name, complimenting the pie case, tipping a waitress for her smile. Folks waved at him, folks like Ray Dunmore. That's the part that'll keep you up. The machine's exterior is upholstered in favors, and half the room owed him one. He ate his melt slow. And when I came down the counter with the coffee pot, because I will not be run out from behind my own counter, he smiled up at me warm as a wood stove and talked just low enough that it was only mine. Hell of a melt, like always. Sip. You know what I admire about you, Jonah? Books that balance. Man after my own heart. Which is why I know you'll appreciate this arithmetic. He turned his mug 1/4 turn, precise as a notary. That girl behind the registers got a sister with a hearing on the 14th, a legal aid kid with 40 other cases, and a shoebox. I've got the contract, the courthouse, and the patience of a man who's done this since before you owned an apron. You've got a month-to-month lease and a curiosity problem. He stood, laid a 20 on a $9 check, and clapped my shoulder on the way out, projecting for the room now. Mayor voiced, "Best melt in the county, everybody." And the room agreed, and he was gone. And I stood there holding a coffee pot in a diner full of his character witnesses, understanding exactly how 4 families had walked into courtrooms alone. Sadie appeared at my elbow, watched the door close behind him, and said, "He does that. Turns the room into furniture that likes him." Then she looked at me sideways. Good thing we know how furniture rises up. And Piper got the squeeze with the velvet on. Dunmore called her personally, magnanimous as a game show host, with an offer. He'd be willing, for Milo's sake, I'm a grandfather myself, to rediscover the disputed payment and reinstate her. All she had to do was sign a fresh land contract. New 8-year term, rate bumped, prior equity credited in goodwill, at about 30 cents on the dollar. Start the treadmill over, 4 months from the finish line at a steeper incline. You've got till the hearing to be smart, honey. That night, hunting for anything, I asked the question I should have asked on day 1, because the file didn't reconcile, and it wasn't Dunmore's side that was off. It was ours. Piper. 68 bank payments, 3 cash. Why would you ever pay that man cash? You're a printout person. Your shoebox has an index. Piper looked at Sadie. Sadie looked at the table, and the table got the truth. Because cash months were the months I was short, Piper said, and he only takes short in cash, in person, at his office, where he can call it a favor. And I couldn't be short in writing, Jonah, because... She stopped, and Sadie finished it, quietly, eyes still down. And this was the sound of the second secret coming up from under the first. Because the shortfall was me. I covered her short months, cash out of my savings, and when my savings ran dry last fall, out of my half of the diner's repair fund. $2,200, Jonah. I've been paying it back in pieces before you'd notice. She finally looked up at me, my business partner, my best friend, the keeper of the second set of keys to my whole life, braced like a woman expecting the sound of something breaking. Payment 61, the one he says never happened. That was my money, in an envelope, on his desk. He looked me in the eye when he took it, so when he lost it, he wasn't stealing a payment. He was stealing it from me, and he knew it, and I couldn't tell you where the repair fund went without telling you all of it. And I couldn't tell you all of it because... She stopped herself, right there, right at the edge of the third secret. And being the furniture in this story, I did not push. I said the repair fund was hers as much as mine and always had been, and I watched relief and something unfinished fight it out on her face. But I clocked the edge she'd stopped at. I couldn't tell you all of it because why, Sadie? What does Ray Dunmore's machine have to do with you? Day 5 answered me. Day 5, I went back to the recorder's office to certify copies for the lawyer we could barely afford, and because I am a bookkeeper down to the marrow, I did the thorough thing. I pulled the title history back past Dunmore's 11-year rotation, to the beginning, to how a predator acquired the trap in the first place. And the beige room went very quiet around me. Ray Dunmore took that house by tax foreclosure 14 years ago, from the delinquent owners of record. Raymond and Ellen Lane. Lane, as in Sadie Lane, as in Piper Lane, as in, I stood there doing the arithmetic of two sisters' whole lives, their parents' house. The house Piper had been bleeding for 6 years to buy back was the house the two of them grew up in. And now the whole file resorted itself in front of me, every unexplained line item reconciling at once. Why Piper, a printout person with an indexed shoebox, had walked into a handshake contract everyone in the county knew was a trap. Because it wasn't a house, it was the house. Why Sadie funded her in cash and in secret, rather than talking her out of it. Because you can't talk a Lane girl out of the porch with her mother's peonies on it, and Sadie knew that better than anyone alive. And why Dunmore, of every family in his rotation, had timed this one with such artisanal cruelty, 4 months from the deed, because he knew whose house it was. He'd taken it from their parents himself. Selling a daughter her own childhood back and repossessing it at the finish line wasn't business to that man. It was a hobby with a ledger. He hadn't just trapped a struggling single mom in his machine, he'd built this particular trap out of her own front door. I drove to the diner with the certified copies on the seat like they were radioactive, and I put them in front of Sadie at the dead-hour lull, and I said, "Third secret." Now, and Sadie Lane, who talks down drunks with a coffee pot, sat down on a milk crate in her own kitchen and told it. Their dad's slow-motion collapse after the plant closed. The taxes that didn't get paid while she, 19, working doubles, thought they were. Dunmore at the door with paperwork and sympathy, helping, buying the debt, taking the house, letting her family rent their own kitchen back for 2 humiliating years before scattering them. I was the one who found the tax notices he'd been hiding. Jonah, Dad's, too late. I've been the family's bookkeeper since I was 19, and my first audit lost our house. So when Piper found it listed 6 years ago and wanted it back, I said no, it's a trap. He doesn't sell, he farms. And she did it anyway. For Mom's peonies still coming up by the porch. For Milo to have the room we had. And I couldn't stop her, so I funded her. In cash, in secret, because I could not stand in front of you. You, of all people, the person whose books balance, the person I. She caught it, swallowed it. 12 years of practice. I could not tell you that the Lane girls were losing the same house twice. Shame's a landlord too, Jonah. I've been paying it longer than Piper's been paying Ray. I sat down on the crate across from her, knee to knee in the kitchen we'd run for 12 years, and I said, "Then let's evict both of them." She laughed. Wet, real, the laugh from the phone call, and hearing it aimed at me, friends, nearly pulled the pocketed sentence right out of me on the spot. Not yet. Not while she was cornered. A thing I'd learned watching Dunmore work all week. Never make your ask when the other person can't afford a no. I intended to be the opposite of that man in every transaction of my life, including this one. Especially this one. Day 6 began with a drive, because a pattern on paper is an argument, but a pattern with faces is a verdict. And Ana Suarez, legal aid 29, permanently underslept, constitutionally incapable of being condescended to, retained the night before for a fee Sadie insisted on paying in pie futures, had given us homework. Find me the Drapers. Year 7, 4 months from their balloon, same as Piper. If anyone kept records, it's a family that got that close. The Drapers live 2 counties over now, in a rental with a chain-link yard, and Bill Draper met us at the door already knowing, somehow, the way people who've been through a machine recognize the sound of it starting up again. "Which family is it this time?" he said. Not a question, we told him. He stood aside. "Coffee's on. Marcy, bring down the crate." The crate. Friends, the Drapers kept everything. 7 years of statements, every letter, and a calendar. Marcy Draper's kitchen calendar from their last year, with payment dates circled, and one date in November marked with a small, careful star. "That's the day we paid the one he lost," Marcy said. "Cash at the office, same as yours." He patted Bill's arm when he took it. 11 weeks later, the notice. She smoothed the calendar flat like it was a child's hair. At the hearing, it was our shoebox against his ledger, and his lawyer, and the magistrate he winters with. Took 11 minutes. 7 years of payments, gone as damages. Our girl was 15. She'd painted her room. Bill stood at the counter with his back to us for a moment, and then turned around and said, "The thing I'd carry into courtroom 2 like a load-bearing beam. Nobody came after us. You understand. Nobody pulled the title. Nobody sat at our table. We thought we were the only ones. That's the trick, son. The machine runs on every family thinking they're the only ones. He put both hands flat on the crate and pushed it across the table to me. You're telling me there's 4 of us, so here's 7 years of evidence and 1 question. Where do we stand on the 14th? 2 rows behind Piper Lane, I said. Subpoenas make it official, but I'm asking first. Then we're not saying no, said Bill Draper, and Sadie's eyes came up and met mine over the crate for 1 loaded half-second, because some sentences, once you've overheard them, follow you around ringing. We drove home with the crate in the truck bed and the Kowalski's new address in my phone. Marcy kept Christmas cards with everyone the machine had chewed, because of course the machine's victims kept each other. It's the only thing he couldn't repossess. And Sadie watched the fields go by and finally said, 4 families, Jonah. 4 kitchens like that one. Her jaw was set the way it gets at closing time. He's not defending a forfeiture on the 14th. He's defending a career. Let's make sure he knows it walking in. Now, the machine had a weak rivet, and her name was Lois Pratt. Booth 2. Decaf, rye toast, every weekday at 7:15. Retired bookkeeper, tipped in exact change and kind words. 22 years keeping books for Dunmore Properties, retired abruptly 4 years back. I'd never once wondered why. Day 7, at 7:15 sharp, I sat down across from her with the coffee pot and asked how retirement was treating her. And Lois Pratt looked at me over her glasses and said, You're slower than I hoped, Jonah. I've been eating rye toast at this window, watching that Lane girl worry herself thin for months, waiting for one of you to ask me the right question. Ask it. Payment 61, I said. Cash, on his desk, last fall. There it is, said Lois, and folded her napkin like closing a meeting. I quit that office because of how cash gets received. There's the ledger the lawyers see, and there's Ray's desk book. Intake, real dates, real amounts, his own margin notes. I know because I kept the carbon duplicates for 22 years, honey. State retention rules, I never worked a day out of compliance in my life, whatever that man's compliance looked like. Her eyes went flint. And when I quit, I kept my carbons, every year of them, in my sewing room. Ray knows I have them, which is why my rent never goes up. Oh yes. He's my landlord too. That's how he likes his witnesses. Housed. She looked out the window at the street he mostly owned. I'm 73. My sister in Tucson has a guest room, and I watched him do to the Drapers what he's doing to Piper, and I said nothing, and the Draper girl was in my 4-H troop. Napkin, folded, final. Bring your lawyer to my sewing room tonight. Tell her to bring a scanner and a strong stomach. The margin note on last fall's cash intake, I peeked before I ever quit, back when I sensed weather, reads, in his hand, Hold posting P Lane, until after notice cures. He wrote down the plan, Jonah. 22 years, he's always written down the plan. Neat books. She stood, left exact change, and delivered the line I'd nail above booth 2 if the health code allowed. That's the thing about tidy men. They file their own confessions. Anna spent that night in Lois's sewing room making sounds I can only describe as devotional. By 2 a.m. we had the carbons for all 3 cash payments including 61, with the hold posting margin note, the 4 family forfeiture rotations certified, now backed by the Draper crate and Marcy's starred calendar. The lease letter and the recorded voicemail Dunmore left Piper repeating his rediscovery offer, an offer to unlose a payment he claimed never existed, which, as Anna observed, is not something you can offer about a payment that never existed. And the 14-year-old tax file with the Lane name on it, which wasn't evidence of anything illegal, and was evidence of absolutely everything else. Here's the play, Anna said, standing at our pie case at 2 a.m. like a general at a map. We don't just defend the forfeiture, we countersue. Equitable mortgage. 6 years of payments toward a deed makes Piper an owner in equity, not a tenant, which means no forfeiture shortcut, means foreclosure standards, means his whole machine's been running the wrong track for 11 years. For 4 families, who I'll be calling as we build the class. The AG's consumer unit has a file open on contract for deed abuse statewide. I know the attorney, this becomes their poster case by Friday. And the poker magistrate, she smiled the way people smile before jumping, gets a recusal motion with the Lake House guest list attached. We're not sneaking past the machine, Jonah. We're putting it on the courthouse steps and taking it apart in public. On the 14th, at 9 sharp. The 14th, 9 a.m. County Courtroom 2, which smells like radiators and consequences. Ray Dunmore arrived in pressed denim and turquoise bolo, folksy right down to the costuming, with his lawyer, his nephew, and the easy weather of a man attending his 400th forfeiture. He surveyed our side: Piper, Milo's shark notebook riding in her bag for luck, Sadie in her interview blazer, me, Anna, Lois Pratt in her church coat, and behind us, filling 2 rows, subpoenaed and delighted, the Kowalskis, 2 Drapers, and the widow Ochoa, and I watched Ray Dunmore's weather begin, just barely, to change. Recusal granted in 4 minutes. The magistrate read the guest list and discovered a conflict with the enthusiasm of a man discovering a fire exit. Judge Aldana, no poker face and no poker games, took the bench, and Anna went to work, and I'll give you the demolition in order. The rotation, certified. 4 families, 4 forfeitures, every one inside the final year, deed never once delivered in 11 years. The judge's eyebrows became their own exhibit. Then Anna did the thing paper can't. She stood Marcy Draper up with her kitchen calendar, and Marcy pointed to the small, careful star in November and told the room about the cash payment that vanished 11 weeks before her notice, and about a 15-year-old's painted bedroom, and the courtroom got the particular quiet that juries get named after. Bill Draper testified for 4 minutes. The sentence that landed was the one he'd given me over the crate. We thought we were the only ones. That's how it runs. Every family thinking they're the only ones. Behind him, the Kowalskis nodded, and the widow Ochoa nodded, and it was suddenly, visibly, not a default hearing. It was a reunion of the harvested, and Ray Dunmore's pressed denim looked less folksy by the minute, and more like a costume the room had all seen before, on the same porch, holding the same paperwork. The Carbons, payment 61, received, dated, initialed, and the margin note blown up on the easel, in Dunmore's handwriting, hold posting P Lane, until after notice cures. Mr. Dunmore's own desk book disagrees, in his own hand, with his own plan attached. The voicemail. Dunmore's porch swing voice offering to rediscover the payment for a fresh contract at 30 cents on the equity dollar. Extortion wearing a grandfather costume. 2 people in the gallery actually laughed, the short, ugly laugh of recognition, and I realized they were prior tenants of his from entirely other houses, here on their own time, because Lois's rye toast window was not the only seat in town that had been watching Ray Dunmore for years and waiting. And Lois Pratt, sworn, 22 years of exact change, church coat buttoned to the collar. Ray keeps 2 books, Your Honor. I kept the honest one. I brought it. Dunmore's lawyer objected to the Carbon's provenance. Lois produced from her handbag her original employment retention log, initialed monthly for 22 years, and said, "Compliance, counselor." Look it up, and the objection died of embarrassment. Dunmore's lawyer asked for a recess and came back aloner than he left. Somewhere in those 20 minutes, he'd remembered other appointments in life generally. Judge Aldana ruled from the bench. Equitable mortgage established, forfeiture denied, and the notice voided. Payment 61 deemed made, as it plainly was, and every prior liquidated damages clause referred, along with the desk book, to the Attorney General's Consumer Unit, whose 2 suited attorneys in the back row stood when named, like the world's most bureaucratic cavalry. Deed to be conveyed to Piper Lane upon the balloon, which the court, given the pattern before me, allowed her to tender into escrow that same week. Outside on the steps, Dunmore attempted the exit line his kind is contractually owed. He stopped in front of me, porch swing voice pitched for the crowd. Hope the melt's worth the lease, son. And it wasn't me who answered. Sadie Lane stepped up beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched, and said, "Check your mail, Ray. We're not renewing." The halfway's buying the old bank building on 3rd. Cash down from 4 families' restitution fund, sellers motivated, something about the AG. You get the empty storefront and the memories. She leaned in 1 inch. You took a house from a 19-year-old bookkeeper once. Turns out she kept the books on you for 20 years. In here. She tapped her own temple, took my arm, and walked us down the steps. And behind us, Ray Dunmore stood alone, in pressed denim, in front of the courthouse, where his machine had just been sold for parts. Piper's balloon cleared escrow that Friday. The deed, the actual, physical, 14 years coming deed, recorded the following Tuesday, and the recorder's clerk, who had watched this whole saga cross her beige counter in installments, broke every rule of clerical neutrality and hugged her. Milo told his class it was for sure. The AG's suit named 4 families and, once the local paper ran the desk book photo, gathered 9 more from 3 counties. Because Bill Draper had been exactly right. The machine ran on every family thinking they were the only ones, And the moment one kitchen calendar made the front page, the county discovered it had been a neighborhood of only ones all along. Restitution's still grinding through, the way justice grinds, but Dunmore Properties has a court-appointed receiver now, which is a phrase that means a bookkeeper Ray doesn't get to choose, is finally posting his payments for him, and I confess that detail brings me a joy I decline to apologize for. Lois Pratt made it to Tucson, guest room and all, but only after testifying twice more, and she still writes the diner monthly, actual letters, exact prose, and her last one ended, "Tell Jonah the receiver, called my carbons immaculate. I have had the word framed." The halfway closed one Sunday, moved 11 blocks, and reopened in the old bank building on 3rd, with the vault door propped open and pie in it, which the local paper photographed, because some metaphors you don't have to build, you just have to butter. And the peonies came up by Piper's porch right on schedule, because Ellen Lane's peonies, unlike everything else in this story, had never once stopped holding their ground. Which leaves the pocket. 10 days I'd carried that sentence, "If he ever asks, I won't say no," through recorders' offices and sewing rooms and courtroom too, and never once used it, because a thing overheard is a thing taken, and I was done watching taken things stand in for earned ones. Housewarming night at Piper's. Piper's, legally, deliciously. I found Sadie on the back porch steps with 2 sodas, watching Milo chart shark territories across his own permanent yard. I sat down next to her, and I told her the truth. All of it. The limes, the hallway, the half-open door. 10 days ago. "I heard you," I said. "If he ever asks, I won't say no. I've been carrying it ever since, and I didn't say anything, because you were cornered and scared, and I will not be a man who makes his ask when you can't afford a no. That's his kind of deal. So I waited until you were standing on one ground." I turned and looked at her. 12 years, 2 counters, 1 war. You're standing on it. So, Sadie, I'm asking. Sadie Lane looked at me for a long, long moment, and then she smiled the smile from the phone call, the one I'd finally earned at face value, and said, "Furniture. All this time, we told each other you were furniture." Her hand found mine on the step between us. "Jonah, I'm not saying no." The porch held. The peonies held. Somewhere in the yard, an 8-year-old declared these waters protected. And that's the whole ledger, friends. Every payment posted, every secret cured, 1 ask, 0 no's. Piper found out she'd been the middleman of a 12-year love story and required, direct quote, "back payments with interest, babysitting, Tuesdays. We pay it. Some contracts you're glad to sign." So now the counter's yours, down in the comments. And I want real answers, because this story runs on people finally saying the quiet part. If you overheard the person you love admit they'd never say no to you, what would you actually do in the next 10 minutes? And what would you be most afraid of losing by doing it? And here's the one that matters. Who's the person you've loved in silence? A best friend? A coworker? Someone across 12 years of counters? And what's the real reason you've never asked? Give me the first initial and the number of years. That's all. Somebody in this comment section is going to see your number, realize theirs is bigger, and finally make the call. If this one landed, subscribe and hit the bell. Because next week I'm telling you what the AG's auditors found when they opened Ray Dunmore's other desk book, a property list with one address circled in red, mine. Ask on one ground, say the quiet part, and never, ever bet against a bookkeeper with a grudge.